One of the most hotly debated topics online, specifically in the anime and manga sphere over the last few decades, has been the conversation over whether or not Griffith did anything wrong. And if I had to answer this monstrosity of a question with just one sentence, I would say, yes, without a shadow of a doubt, Griffith did do everything wrong. But the far more interesting conversation is discussing the nuance that led him to make this decision in the first place, and that is what I'm going to be doing today. During my first read of Golden Age, Griffith was my favorite character. I liked him even more than Guts. And while me saying that might be kind of hard for some people to hear, it's just simply true. Griffith is by far the most interesting character in Golden Age just because of how complex he is. From the moment we meet Griffith, we can tell that there is something off about him. Underneath the beautiful and soft facade is something very dark and sinister underneath. He immediately shows signs of having some controlling issues and abandonment issues. Not only that, but he is the first person in the entire series that we've seen best guts in combat, immediately making him not only a mental and emotional force to be reckoned with, but a physical one as well. But after this first sort of weird scene, Griffith kind of returns to normality. He's an amazing and cunning leader and seemingly a good friend. Does he definitely have his fair share of more dark and sinister moments? Absolutely. But for every bad thing that he does, there is a logical reason behind it. He didn't just start assassinating the feudal lords for fun. To be fair, they were coming after him first. In fact, I would say the most sinister thing that Griffith does pre-eclipse is the way he emotionally manipulates Charlotte. The way he plays and toys with this girl's emotions like she's just some pawn on his chessboard is just really sad and really toxic. Not only that, but his physical advance on her is super uncomfortable. But I think to understanding the character of Griffith, you must first contextualize why he's doing all of this in the first place. I would consider Griffith a utilitarian, a perspective that many people can relate to. He is an if the ends justify the means kind of guy. And this mindset pushes him to do some pretty terrible things, but one aspect of this that many people like to overlook is the terrible things that he does to himself because of this mindset. One of my favorite Griffith moments in all of Berserk comes after he sees the little boy who died for his dream. He sees him holding the little knight and wonders if this is all his fault, if his dream is worth it. He feels immense guilt for the death of this child, and I will put my money on the fact that he feels immense guilt for all of the people that die in the name of his dream. But because specifically of this one little boy's death, he decides to sell his body, sell his soul to a creepy old man so that no one else has to die. And this has a profound effect on Griffith moving forward, leading him to actually self-harm because he just can't contain all of his shame. Which brings me to one of my other favorite things about Griffith. Griffith is a facade. The White Hawk, the leader of the Band of the Falcon, all of these accolades that he calls himself is just to cover up the absolute self-hating and loathing individual that is just festering deep down. Deep down, this is a character who has immense guilt for his actions. This is a character who never knows if he'll escape his little poor town. This is a character that is both equally ambitious and insecure. And this insecurity is showcased no better than with his relationship with Guts. Guts versus Griffith on top of these snowy hills, one of my favorite moments in all of Berserk. Specifically because it shows just how far Griffith is willing to go to hide his insecurity. This is a character that would rather kill his best friend than have him walk away from him. Again, showcasing those profound abandonment and attachment issues that he had all those years ago. And then once Guts ultimately beats him, Griffith just spirals out of control, with him just making a string of terrible decisions, and his life just getting worse and worse and worse. And this all just eventually leads up to the eclipse, where after quite literally losing everything, the God Hand offer him a chance to get it all back and more. And all he needs to do is just sacrifice his friends and loved ones, sacrifice his old life to be born anew. Which he does. He says the words, "I sacrifice." And the number one cope that I've heard people use for years now as to why this wasn't his fault is the fact that causality was at play and he was being manipulated the whole time. And while it is true to an extent that Griffith was being manipulated, I mean, his whole life was built up for this singular moment, that doesn't remove his urgency as a character. One interesting thing about the Baylets that not a lot of Berserk fans know is once you have one, it doesn't mean you have to use it. The odds are definitely overwhelmingly in the favor that you will due to the God Hand pushing you in that direction, but you don't have to. And the reason that we know this is because of a character that many people forgot even existed, and that's the Count from the Black Swordsman arc. At the end of Black Swordsman, the Count is offered another sacrifice deal. While pleading to the God Hand for his life, they say that if he sacrifices his daughter, he can come back just as strong if not stronger, and he can beat Guts. And for the first and only time in the series, we see an apostle reject the God Hand. Even though the odds were stacked against him, even though causality itself was pushing him in the direction of sacrificing his daughter, he didn't. His love for his daughter was stronger than his lust for power, proving my point that the Baelits are not 100% accurate with their predictions. You can reject them. So in this moment where Griffith chooses to sacrifice his friends, when he decides to say the words, "I sacrifice," it's not causality forcing him to do it, it's himself. He wants this. And while some of you might not count this as canon, in the omitted chapter where Griffith goes and speaks to the idea of evil itself, he literally says, "I want wings," proving the point that this is not something he has no power over. This isn't something that he's just like, "Oh no, please don't make me so strong." He wants this. He very much wants to become Femto. And to prove this point even further, at the end of the eclipse, when Skull Knight breaks into the eclipse and takes Guts and Casca and saves them, the God Hand themselves admit that they didn't see this coming. And that is Kentaro Miura himself, coming off the pages to grab you, the reader, and tell you, these are not some omnipotent gods that know everything. So even though the eclipse happened over 20 years ago, for all of you still believing that Griffith is innocent because he was being manipulated and causality was going against him, while you're not wrong that he was being manipulated, this doesn't just take away all of his urgency from this moment. The last thing that I want to talk about in this video is whether or not I think someone from Guts' group will use the Baelit they have in the future. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not 100% sure. I think the Baelit is going to be activated in some sense, but I do not think that any of the group or Guts himself are actually going to go through with using it. I think at the end of Berserk's story, we're going to get a scene with one of our main characters in which they end up rejecting the Baelit. And I think it would be really interesting if Guts could almost use this as an irony towards Griffith, to show him that he did choose this path. This wasn't something that was forced upon him, and that he is just a terrible person. But yeah, for everyone who's still defending Griffith decades after his atrocity, I really don't know what to say to you anymore. While Griffith was indeed manipulated, at the end of the day it still was his choice, and he sacrificed the Band of the Hawk because he wanted to. Now, for anyone returning to my video who's been watching my content for a while now, I have a question. Would you guys want me to cover the show Invincible? It's pretty hot right now, and I've had a few people ask me to start doing some coverage on it. I saw the first season a while back, and I thought it was pretty good at the time, so I might rewatch it. So let me know if that's something you'd be interested in, since it's another animated show, and I just did Arcane. And yeah, if you guys want me to review Invincible, just let me know in the comments down below. And until then, I'll catch you all later.